I have a lot of memories of Richard. We met first when, in London, in a restaurant in London. He'd asked me to come down and meet him. And it was just fortuitous that we were putting together an idea in the university for a new build. A lot of our students in the then adult education department were students with disability. A lot of them were doing art, music and related art subjects, and we had nowhere to accommodate them which was accessible. In fact, what we had was very inaccessible. And it was one Saturday morning that I heard a radio programme with Richard was talking about accessibility. And he said that he didn't think there was anywhere in the country which really offered true accessibility to people with disability. So I thought, well, if I got in now and wrote to him and said, at least in our minds, we had an idea that there could be a building at Leicester University. And because of that connection, because of his interest in disability and the arts, and because of his interest in the University of Leicester, he wrote back and said, well, let's meet. So it really was fortuitous. It was sheer luck that I heard the programme and that we were able to get together. Then he came up to Leicester in I think it was the beginning of 1990. He came up and met the then Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Edwards, and had a meeting with us all and said that he would be prepared to front a fundraising campaign and to be the patron of the centre. It wasn't called Richard Attenborough Centre at that stage. In fact, he was very reluctant to take on the name Richard Attenborough Centre because he really didn't want to draw attention to himself, but to the idea of accessible arts. But he did agree. And in that year, he and his brother David were given the freedom of the city of Leicester. So that freedom ceremony coincided with the time when he launched with us the campaign for the Richard Attenborough Centre. Then we had to raise just something over £2 million. Sounds peanuts now, it wasn't then. None of us had fundraising experience except Richard. He was very involved in filmmaking. And we had to earn it all. We had to raise it all. There was an understanding in the university that if we raised all the money ourselves, then the university would pay for running costs. But there was no doubt that had we not had Richard with us, we'd have been floundering. We were not fundraisers. A certain amount came in because of people's goodwill, but we had to have a strategy, and it was the strategy that he put in place. He was a terrifically hard worker. He demanded a huge amount from himself. He demanded a huge amount from us. But he stayed with us, and he was responsible for getting all the large sums of money that we got in prior to us starting to build, which was in 1995. So that sort of feeling of gratitude from us, from people who were working there, and of course stays with us forever, because without him we couldn't have done it. Things have changed a lot in Leicester since the opening 1997, of course. Things have changed a lot. The idea that there should be accessibility for everybody is now, I think, taken for granted. It was then not taken for granted. It was not unusual for people to not to be able to access even fairly modern buildings without a ramp being put in place for them to, if they were wheelchair users. So I think there's been a sea change in how people feel about accessibility and opportunity. And of course, there has been a sea change in educational ideas about continuing education and opportunities throughout life for revisiting things that maybe in one's youth one did like dance. Maybe you weren't able to take it forward because you had mobility problems. Those sorts of things have changed. I think Richard, to a large part, was responsible for pushing for those changes to happen in Leicester. So many meetings where he was jet-lagged and tired and preoccupied with, filming, and still put in the time and the commitment to us. I mean, so many occasions where that was so important. I remember one incident when he was so busy in post-production But he did come up to Leicester for a fundraising event on a Saturday evening, I believe, and it was quite late at night when it was finished, and he and I were walking down New Walk together by ourselves late at night. It was deserted, and quite a large group of young men started moving towards us in what I thought was quite an aggressive way, and I was alarmed. And they were surrounding us. And I was alarmed for our safety, for his safety, but I also thought, oh gosh, if anything happened to him while he was in Leicester, if he was mugged or something of that sort, it would be terrible for the city. He was supremely calm, held my hand. He does do a lot of hand-holding, as you know. And they came up to us and they said, "Are you Richard Attenborough?" And he said, "Yes, darlings. Can we have your autograph, please?" And he diffused the situation. Of course, they recognised him. They knew who he was. He wasn't in crisis. I was nearly in crisis. It turned out they were all medical students at the university. It's a rather sweet story. It does sum up the way he was able to control every situation. One of the first times he came up, and it was a formal meal at the university, so all the bigwigs were there, and it was Best Bibb and Tucker. And he'd just finished making Miracle on 34th Street. And he was telling us about it, and in the middle of the meal he stood up and demonstrated how he could control Santa's reindeer and the sleigh with his whip. And it was quite a spectacular, and everybody was so pleased, and everybody burst out clapping and laughing, of course. It was a garden for sensory perceptions, a statement about how you can enjoy the environment through all sorts of senses, obviously sight, smell, but touch, and so on. It was a modest garden. I think it's still here. Whether it still performs the same function, I don't know. But Richard took it very, very seriously. We all did. I do remember sitting next to him and a very large and extremely burly reporter from the Mercury who was doing a story for the local paper, Richard. And the whole time, Richard held his hand. And I could see this poor man found it so difficult. In the end, he had to submit and enjoy, because that was Richard's way.